guys. Just want to quickly talk a little bit about the process of hiring a police commissioner, which is the title. It's a civil service position. Appointed. It is hired and appointed by the appointing authority, which is the Director of Public Safety, again, Charlene Deacon. The City of St. Louis will review candidates and ultimately make that selection from a small panel led by Deacon. But what we do want to do is talk a little bit about what that looks like. So we have two options I mentioned earlier. Either we can hire an outside firm to help us select groups, individuals that we think an advisory committee and residents give us input on. We can also list the position as we normally do with civil service positions on the website, encourage good applicants, review them through a panel selected by personnel and Department of Public Safety director, and then a second final interview will be conducted by the director herself. What we can do with this process is have additional levels of interaction through public forums, through interviews, resume reviews, questions and answers. And so what this is a very early stage in this process. We anticipate this will take some time to go through, most likely 6 to 9 months. And so in that process, there are many times where the public can provide input through forums like this. We have regularly scheduled Citizen Advisory Committee meetings. We have a website where you can go and give input to. And so along that process, the city will take and share with the Citizen Advisory Committee members that input. And I think then that's the basic overview. Again, ultimately, the Department of Public Safety Director makes the selection, but we want to make sure that she has the best candidates that meet the community needs, and that's the opportunity we have here today is get that input from you all. So I'd like to now say if anyone has any initial comments to make before we dive into the small group. We're going to try to ask that people keep them brief because we do have a full agenda here in small group sessions. But if anyone has any remarks, if you just leave that either up front or on your chair, we'll pick them up and add them in. And so again, the comments right now, we're just asking that you give us input on the process itself. There'll be more opportunity to talk about the qualities you're looking for in a police chief in the small group session. Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you. I'm Bill Monroe, and I'm a former St. Louis police officer. And first of all, I was hoping we'd have some coffee and donuts like the last time we were in this building. So keep your budget up. On the comment of police chief, I think number one, how long are you saying that this process is going to take?
So traditionally, hiring for a position like this, we list it, we do interviews, we do background checks. It can take, based on feedback from the committee, we haven't even listed this yet. We want to have some public forums first. So I don't know exactly how long it'll take, but I would anticipate it would take probably a solid 6 months to find, hire, and bring on the new chief.
We don't have that much time, people. We don't have that much time to pick a police chief. I came on the department as a young man out of the Army in 1967, and a lot of the young police officers that are currently here weren't born. And what I see with this police department today, it's not too much has changed since the time I came on under a chief of police named Eugene Kemp. And race has always been a factor in this police department, race. And we can't discount that. And to stick our heads in the sandbox and disregard it, we're being foolish. This is Bill Monroe's feeling. The current acting chief of police has abdicated his ability to even put his name in the hat for police chief. And I want to go back to what happened when the young black police officer who was shot. And the stories that we got in the community, doesn't give me a lot of faith. And I think that hiring an outside person who does not know the racial history of this police department, he can't give us what we need. And I think that there are those within the St. Louis Police Department currently there that with the right guidance and not being afraid of making a political mistake, he can give us what we need because they got some information about this community. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the raises that they're talking about coming up for the police department. We can't give you officers a raise under these circumstances because unless, and this is my feeling, with the current police oversight, unless we give that commission subpoena powers, real powers, then we can't afford to let this thing continue. And being an ex-cop, they need more money. But we at a time where we have to make a balance and a trade-off as to what really works. And we need to take that in consideration. I served as an undercover police officer. I served as plainclothes. I worked narcotics. And I was a recipient of guns put on me by my white counterpart who did not know I was a policeman. It wouldn't happen to a white officer. So the sensitivity training that you're talking about is worthless unless we hold our police officers to laws, to being lawful. We don't just give a man a pass jumping out. It wouldn't happen to a white officer. So I'm saying to you, we don't have the time, the months. We need to come together as a community, look at our department, what's happening to us now, and make a choice. But we cannot just give one man the right to run a department. The last police chief, I worked in narcotics. How do you run a city and disband the narcotics unit in the midst of the worst heroin epidemic ever? How do you do that? One man made that decision, he's not being held accountable. So the police chief that we chose has to be held accountable to this community, to this voice. And this is the committee. I don't see a lot of, you need some help. You need some additional members on this committee to make some wise choices. I'll let it go at this. I got a lot more to say. And I'm proud to say, too, I was one of the gentlemen who put on this fundraiser for the officer. And we raised $2,400 for this officer on the corner of Kings Highway and Delmar. And 80% of the people donating were white. Many police officers came and dropped $20 bills in that bucket. So we are a community that can come together and make something happen. But let's take our heads out of the sand or somewhere else. Thank you.
Thank you. So if any last comments, again, generally about the search process, and to clarify, and so thank you for bringing this up, we are accepting candidates both from within the police department, outside the police department. We hope that we will have a great applicant pool, of internal and external. We're not ruling anyone out, so we are excited to have some good candidates. And to the narcotics unit, we are bringing that back, is my understanding, so thank you for bringing that up. But is there any last questions before I turn this over to Jessica? About this, again, questions about the search. If it's comments about anything else or about qualities about the police chief, we're going to do that in the small group session. But if there's any questions or comments about the search itself, happy to take those questions now. Yes. We would have to put that out to bid and see what applications came in. It just depends what they offer and what services. It could range quite broadly, so I'm not sure I have a final answer on that yet.
Very quickly, the question that she asked was, what is the cost? And it varies depending on if it's internal or they're using a search firm.
So she's asking what the cost would be. So I have some are $50,000 up to $90,000. So it can be quite expensive. You're flying people in potentially. You're doing a lot of resume background searches. So that is one range, but it just depends on the specific search firm and what they offer to do. We will be having a Citizen Advisory Committee meeting on Tuesday, and we're going to be talking about that. So if you come to that meeting, we'll also share with people who have signed in on the front what that decision is. But I hope that on Tuesday we'll have a better sense of that based on committee feedback. Okay, one last question in the back before I turn to Jessica. The meeting is going to be at the International Institute, so thank you, Anna, one of our members. International Institute, which is on 3401 Arsenal Street in Tower Grove East on the south side of St. Louis. And we will rotate them to different parts of the city. Yeah, and I apologize, we ran out of those, but we will make sure we'll email those out to anyone who signed in, and we'll have them at future meetings as well. Thanks. Okay, thank you all.
Good morning. My name is Jessica Perkins, and I'm actually the lead facilitator for the small group sessions. I know many of you thought about it, that you would come in and answer some questions individually, but we know that we have approximately 60 people in the room, and it's very difficult to engage everyone as a big group. So what we're doing is dividing you into 4 small groups, and we're asking you to answer 3 questions. And I recall that when I facilitated a small group at the International Institute on Tuesday, a gentleman asked me, how does this help the committee? And I'll give you an example. The first question that we are going to ask you has to do with kind of like the ideal scenario for public safety. What is the role of the police department, or what is the role of law enforcement, and what is the role of residents living in that particular neighborhood of or community? And I responded back to him, the reason why that's helpful is that that same question can be asked of the police commissioner candidate. And if his or her answers don't jive with what we've heard not only here today, but on the 27th, that kind of helps the committee to make a decision, maybe this particular candidate is not right for us. So part of the reason why we have you in the small groups is so that we can hear everyone, because when you've got 60 people and 3 questions, and I just do a minute per question, that means that we're here for 3 hours just for the 3 questions. So we're gonna ask you to go into the small groups. I've got 4 facilitators. 2 of the small groups will be in this room, and the other 2 will be in other areas. And the reason why we're doing that is at the International Institute, we had all 4 groups in the same room, and it was very difficult to hear everyone. So we're moving you around because we heard that issue, and we decided to make a difference in that. So I'm going to have my first facilitators to stand up. I'd like about 12 to 15 people to go with her. Chelsea Carter is first facilitator, so can I have about 12 to 15 people to go with Chelsea, please? We'll see you in about maybe an hour and 6 minutes. What is that, 66 to 70 minutes? All right then. Jessica Wernley. Jessica, will you go to the top of the steps? I need about 15 people to follow Jessica. All right, so we have probably half the group left. So I need half of you all to go to this side, and you're working with Atia Thurman. So just move over to this side. And then anyone else remaining, please go to this board, and Aziza will be your facilitator.
support greater police awareness and sensitivity. So how can they support that within the department? Cultural competence, mental illness, and racial equity in policing. Okay.
I think we need a new chief that's going to stop the white police officers from shooting and killing black males or black people, especially young black males.
Tell you the next step for me. The facilitators will actually send me verbatim information of what you did in the small groups. I will actually turn that into a full report of the small groups, as well as the polling that took place initially and your polling that you're doing right now. That summary will be sent to the City of St. Louis, and they will post it so that you can see the results. It is very likely that I will combine the two forums unless the city asks me to do them separately. Okay? Atia?
I want to thank my group. They were extremely interactive and they had a lot to say, and we were very respectful of each other. So we had a chance to quickly at the end look at some major buckets, some major themes around leadership and transformation that we hope to have with the new police chief. And so one of those areas is law enforcement, the officers, the people who make up the police force. There's a lot of work we want to see around their background, their hiring, and their training. And just some of those things, as you can imagine, relate to backgrounds that don't have lots of infractions or discipline around EOC infractions and things like that. Very comprehensive training that prepares them well to be part of the community, to serve, to understand cultural competency, trauma-informed care, implicit bias, and not just training one time to check it out, to check it off the box, but ongoing training, continuous training, refresher courses, evaluation of their performance, recommendations for them, and discipline when necessary. Another big bucket for us was accountability and transparency. And part of that transparency was not just reporting to neighborhoods about what's going on in the neighborhoods, but reporting about officers, reporting about the involvement of officers in different things. And a huge theme was community involvement engagement, that they really should be embedded in the community, that they should be members of the community, that they both value the community they're in, and so that they also become valued members of the community. And that some of the things that create distance, we just can't have that anymore, and distance and difference. So it was a great group. I can't capture everything they said because it was prolific. So thank you, and I will pass it on to the next facilitator.
Yes, so my name is Aziza Binti, and our group really focused a lot on some of the key points that were just mentioned. But in terms of with training, looking beyond just training and understanding that certain things cannot be trained out. If an officer is not interested in shifting their perspective at all, their implicit biases are getting in the way of the performance of their jobs. So looking at how we can weed officers out that are presently employed, that have disciplinary action and actually something happening as a result of that, them being moved out of the police force if that's necessary. But also really making sure that we're looking for these things in a new police chief and also in employing new officers, that these are the things that we're looking for. So we're not just going in and weeding out the ones that are there. We're making sure that the ones that we are looking for, that we're not just taking anybody, that we're saying, okay, you don't have the qualifications in this particular way. You're not culturally sensitive enough to these different issues, and this would be problematic. Some of the other points that we talked about was looking at systemic racism and how that impacts the community and how that's going to impact the police chief and also his or her officers in terms of looking at how poverty and mental illness and lack of resources in certain communities, how that impacts crime. And so, of course, that's going to impact our officers, and hoping that they would understand how, not even hoping, but making sure that they understand how those things run together. I cannot see that far away. But some of the other points in understanding the historical relevance of different things that have happened in our city, and making sure that our officers get that, and making sure that our police chief understands that. And kind of the last point that we really stuck with was making sure that we have a police chief that is interested in getting resources from cities that have had challenges like ours, and they found things that work. We don't want a police chief that has his head in the sand or thinks that he or she knows all the answers. We want a police chief that says, I don't know, and I'm willing to reach out to the community. I'm willing to look for resources to help my officers and help my community to make the shifts and the change that are necessary. And I said that was the last point, but this really is the last one. That we understand that as a community, we need to support our police chief and our police department. They also need to support us. So each side needs to look at what can I do, and then come together to make those things happen.
All right, I'm Jessica. My group had a very, very rich discussion, lots of different ideas, so I'll pull out a couple of the high points. One of the things that really stuck with me that one of the young people shared in our room was that they don't want to have to teach a police chief about how to engage community and how to treat community. That should be something that they already know how to do and that they've demonstrated. We talked about fear being the motivating factor in a lot of police actions, and how we want to make sure that we change that, so that we hire a chief that understands that we can't have officers on the street who are so fearful that they're, doing harmful actions to citizens. We talked a lot about the pros and cons to hiring an outside chief and even an outside firm throughout this process. And some of the pros being that we want someone who's not so ingrained in the police department and doesn't have those political ties, but we also want someone who understands St. Louis and knows St. Louis. So we kind of wrestled with that tension a little bit about what that means for hiring a firm that's local versus outside, as well as hiring a police chief that's already here. We also talked about the narrative of the North Side and how that's been harmful, and how that's just been talked about in media, and how we want to change that, and we want a police chief to play a role within that as well. So those are just a few of our highlights.
I'm Chelsea, and my group, I'm going to kind of give you guys a summary by question. So in thinking about what public safety looked like, for my group that really looked like children and teens being outside, being able to play, enjoy themselves, and thinking about it as a bottom-up approach. So if the family is safe, then that means that the community is safe, and then from there, different organizations, communities, institutions from there. Also, an idea about what I can do individually is to go outside, get off your iDevices, stop looking at the computer, stop watching TV, and be outside and engage with your neighbors could be a huge piece of helping public safety get better in St. Louis. Also, we talked about the idea of collaboration around different departments in St. Louis. So the police department not being the answer for everything. I'm glad I don't need that note anymore. Not being the answer for everything, and so looking for social workers, child protective services to call different resources so everything doesn't have to always go through the police department. For our second question, we also talked about, oh, wait, no, I did forget something. I might need that. There was also a really great point that we made about ownership. And so all of the departments, both individually and law enforcement, taking ownership for the things that have gone wrong in St. Louis. And so acknowledging that things have not always been perfect. And so how can law enforcement and individuals work together to help create an ideal scenario for St. Louis? So for our second question, thinking about cultural competence, racial equity, and what was the third one? Mental illness. One was really important, was no tolerance of rogue cops. And so that means an accountability from community members and from the police department to say, hey, there's somebody here who's not being aware of mental illness, who's not being aware of cultural competence, is not being aware of racial equity, and therefore they don't belong to be here. Our other idea was to build relationships with community members to help basically all of these three issues. And lastly, it's harder because I don't have my thing up here. Oh, and lastly for our what does the next police chief need to know about St. Louis, the most important was that racism is real in St. Louis, and understanding that not just saying racism is real, but also believing it and knowing how to navigate that in all of the different arenas that racism portrays itself in St. Louis. Also being aware of the Del Mar divide, and not just being aware of it in it's an idea, but understanding that there are different life expectancy rates when you cross the Del Mar divide, there's different class rates, and that there's also different education attainments because of the Del Mar divide, and understanding that history and why it is there. And lastly, we talked about the fact that opposition is going to be real for the next police chief. And so understanding that this is a tough job and that St. Louis is political. And so how do you navigate that system in order to ensure public safety for St. Louis, knowing that your fellow officers might not always agree with you and that your city hall might not always agree with you, but the community might also not agree with you, and how to make that better for everyone in St. Louis.
Thank you. Please give the 4 facilitators a round of applause. They're amazing. So we are going to get started with the last of the polling, but before we start that, I just want to do one quick plug. As you leave here, there is a wall mural that has 3 questions, and we're asking you to write your answers. Please take the time to at least answer one of the 3 questions. It's another way that we can capture information. As I stated before, we had a forum of 2 hours, and we wanted to get as much information as possible. So some of that was small groups, some of that is through the polling, and some of that is also through the wall mural. All right?
All right, so we're going to move on to the content questions that we have for our polling, and you can see the directions up there to how to join. And you also, if you don't have a device, there are paper copies out by the front desk that you can use as well to answer. So our first question here is, before defining the qualities a new police chief should possess, if you could create a police department from scratch to serve your neighborhood, what qualities would that department possess? In order to lead the police department described in your first answer, what qualities and skills should the new police chief, him or herself, possess? Okay, the next question. In a previous role, what experiences might a successful candidate have had that indicate their ability to build trust between the department and the community? Based on the city's description of the recruitment process, interview and selection process, from your perception, using a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being extremely likely, what is the likelihood of hiring a police chief with the qualities and experiences you've previously mentioned using an external search firm? Final question. Based on the city's description of the recruitment, interview, and selection process, from your perception using a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being extremely likely, what is the likelihood of hiring a police chief with the qualities and experience you've previously mentioned using the city's standard process? That's the last question. Thank you, everybody.
All right, that concludes our forum, our second forum, and we thank each and every one of you for coming out. The committee members, I'd like at least one of them to come up and kind of give us an idea of their perspective of today's event or the one, about 10 days ago.
Hi, my name is Irv Switzer. I'm a lawyer in downtown St. Louis and was appointed to this committee, a longtime resident. I've found both of these forums extremely helpful, a lot of different perspectives, a lot of people providing their insight from personal experiences, which I find very helpful. Ultimately, I think the way that this will be most helpful to me is as we get farther along in the process and start dealing directly with applicants and candidates, will be to find out how many of the candidates or which candidates come up with some of these ideas on their own. I'm not inclined to tell them what the qualities that I think are the right ones. I want to see if they realize what the right ones are on their own. So this is an extremely helpful process for me, and so I really appreciate everybody taking the time to do it. This is a lot of time to take out of your day.
Especially a Saturday. I'm going to let David close it out with his perspective, and then we are going to let you enjoy the rest of your weekend, and thank you.
Hey everyone, David Dwight. So yeah, I really appreciate everyone coming here today and sharing their vision for what public safety could look like in St. Louis. And this today, as well as the previous forum, has been really exciting for me because I feel like we're already starting to model that culture of public safety as something more than just enforcement, but something as like a shared responsibility among communities. So I'm really excited that we're engaging in that and looking forward to having a consistent community engaged process throughout this. So thank you all.
So you'll see on your agenda, if you didn't grab one on your way out. There's a website, a link to a website, bit.ly/STLCityCAC home. That is where you will find materials from our last meeting, materials from this meeting. We will share results from the feedback from this meeting and the polling. We'll also be putting this poll up for anybody in the public to take who wasn't able to attend the meetings. We'll also have the dates and the locations of future meetings that are open to the public at this website. So the July 11th is the next meeting of the council, so it won't be a public forum in this format. It's the council's meeting to decide what are the next steps. That will be from 6 to 8 on Tuesday, July 11th at the International Institute. It is open to all the meetings are open. All right, thanks everybody.